Let's take a look right now at the Dow. Stocks are down across the board. The Dow is down about 400 points after oil prices surged more than $100 a barrel this morning. It is the first surge of this amount for crude oil, Brent crude oil, since the pandemic. So joining us now in the broadcast center is Kristen Myers. She is the ETF editor-in-chief at Asset TV. Kristen, thank you so much for joining us.
Of course.
So I'd asked our Money Watch correspondent Kelly O'Grady and our co-anchor here, what's the line that oil needs to cross for us to really start worrying about this? She said 100.
It's 100. Yeah. we already passed it.
Been there, done that.
Yeah.
How is what's happening in the Middle East, and what are the new attacks on oil infrastructure in that region? How have they impacted these prices?
Yeah, so it's going to be in one of two ways. First is going to be the Strait of Hormuz. It's something that I know you guys have been saying over and over again. It's a really important shipping chokehold, right, that passes by Iran. And 20 million barrels of oil pass through there every single day. That's almost as much as a quarter of the world's oil supply. And so when they shut that down, or tankers say, hey, we don't want to go through there because we're afraid our tankers or our ships are going to get hit, that's really cutting off a quarter of the world's oil supply. And then you also have the fact that neighboring countries are saying, we're going to be shutting down oil production because they are also now targets in this escalating war. And so both of those things combined have really caused those oil prices to ratchet upward.
So, as you know, the Energy Secretary Chris Wright told our Margaret Brennan on Face the Nation Sunday that elevated energy prices are going to be temporary and gas prices shouldn't go much higher. I want to play a little bit of what he said, and let's talk about it.
We have a temporary period of elevated energy prices, but it will not be long. In the worst case, this is weeks. This is not months. And it leads to a much better place. It leads to an Iran that's defanged, that can't threaten its neighbors, can't threaten American soldiers, and can't continue to drive up energy prices by making a mess of the Middle East. They can move to commerce, not conflict.
He sounds pretty confident, and there's a lot of chatter, well, this isn't even as high as it was under President Biden, but we know that the price of oil under President Biden had a lot to do with the pandemic. This is a self-inflicted spike in energy prices, and he doesn't know how long this is going to last. Iran has just named their new supreme leader. They are increasingly defiant, and the idea of just bombing a country into submission, we know historically has never worked. Now, if they're thinking about putting boots on the ground, again, that will lead to another spike. So what's the backup plan? Chuck Schumer wants to tap into the strategic reserves. Is that something that could work?
Yeah, so there's a couple of options that the United States can take. I'll run you through them really quickly from least effective to most effective. So least effective, President Trump has said, hey, the United States government is actually going to provide insurance to back those tankers that are going through the Strait of Hormuz. Not super effective because even though a lot of these, shipping companies might say, hey, great, we can recoup our losses in case our tanker ends up on the bottom of the ocean, you have to understand that the captain and the crew are probably not really interested in that option.
You go first.
Yeah, so that's one. Two, we can actually have the U.S. military escort these tankers, and that's also been floated out there. That's going to be a little bit more effective, definitely going to give a little bit more confidence to some of those shippers to go through that Strait of Hormuz. Then there's that suggestion that you just said, which is essentially release the barrels of oil that we have in the strategic reserves. Here's the problem, though. As I mentioned, 20 million barrels of oil pass through the Strait of Hormuz every single day, which means that our reserves can really only feed global oil supply for 20 days.
Well, they wouldn't go globally, right?
No, they actually would release it, not just to the United States, but they would actually release it a little bit wider to show in good faith that the United States is interested in keeping those is really trying to prevent those oil prices from being too elevated. And then the last one, which is going to be the most effective, is end the conflict. Right. That's the one that everyone really
The other
wants.
one that the president floated is, we're getting oil from Venezuela, but clearly not having an effect.
That's going to take even longer, honestly. It's a possibility, but that's going to take weeks and months. Yeah.
Kristen, thank you so much.
Always good to have you, my friend. Thank you.
Informative.
An estimated 20% of the world's oil makes its way, as Kristen just mentioned, through the Strait of Hormuz every single day. Since last week, shipments have all but ceased. So joining us now this morning is someone with some unique insight on that critical shipping channel. Sal Mercogliano is an adjunct professor at the U.S. Merchant Marine Academy who has sailed through the Strait of Hormuz during the first Persian Gulf War. Thanks so much for joining us. So tell us about your experiences navigating the Strait of Hormuz and why it's such a critical passageway for the world's oil.
Well, thank you for having me. The Strait of Hormuz is a classic, what we call maritime choke point. It's a really narrow area of water. It's highly congested, not just with oil tankers and cargo ships, but also with small fishing dhows. And when you go through the Strait of Hormuz, it's a narrow little passage. A lot of traffic coming through. On average, somewhere in the range of 100 and 125 ships come through. There's a lane through it, so you get to your lane, kind of like going through a traffic separation scheme. But more importantly, what you see coming out of it is oil tankers and liquefied natural gas carriers and liquefied petroleum gas carriers. And then you get into the Persian Gulf, and it's even more crowded in there. I mean, just because you get through the strait doesn't mean you're not congested anymore. It's very narrow, and you can get hit by sandstorms. Very unique little part of the world there.
So, Sal, given the current conflict, how long might you think it would take for traffic to get back to normal once conditions are safe enough to pass through?
Well, I think the important thing to remember is even if we open up the strait tomorrow and go back to normal traffic, you've already caused a disruption. It's going to take weeks to get everything back into order. This difficulty, as everybody knows, was there was no real plan beforehand the attack took place. It kind of shocked the economic system, and particularly the marine insurance system. And that is what's been causing really the ships to kind of hold in place. The ships could sail through. The strait isn't really closed. It's just the shipping companies are hesitant to go through for fear of loss and risk, and they want to make sure that their downside is covered. Once that's done, we're already starting to see some ships come through. Several Greek ship owners, for example, have run ships through. We've got an oil tanker heading into India right now that ran the strait the other day.
Sam, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, Sal, so as our markets reporter explained, one of the options on the table is having the United States military escort some of these vessels. I mean, it probably worked during World War II in the North Sea, but I wonder, is that something when the military is already stretched in fighting Iran and other hotspots, what is the likelihood of that even being successful or even being a real option?
Yeah, there's an example of it from the end of the 1980s during the tanker war, where the U.S. started escorting Kuwaiti tankers. But that was a very small number of ships. And it needs to be remembered, we had to escort those ships all the way from Kuwait out into the Gulf of Oman. It's over 500 miles. It's not just a question of running some ships through the Strait of Hormuz. Persian Gulf is very narrow to begin with, and we've already seen attacks on ships off the coast of Kuwait, off the coast of Bahrain and Qatar. So you would have to provide a myriad of defense all the way up the entire Persian Gulf, and the U.S. Navy just doesn't have the assets or resources really to accomplish that in any meaningful way. They could put some ships up to screen it, but right now there's not one U.S. Navy ship in the Persian Gulf.
And I wonder if that would make those tankers a target if it has U.S. Navy ships around it. Sal Mercogliano, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.